to this. Perfect. Thank you very much, Peter, for accepting this invitation. I maybe, as you know, or maybe not, I'm working on having published a couple of articles on the existential problem of our society today and try to address the issue of meaning of life. And I say I need to interview a couple of people, and you were one of them because your life has been so special. And I got an invitation not too long ago for your 80th birthday, so congratulations.
Thank you.
And I thought this is the man to talk to. So we know each other for a long time, so for about 25 years or something, and and I'm not interested too much to what you have done, but more interesting on why you have done what you have done. And so if you can give us a little bit the background. I know you were born in Queens and you have been living there. We visit a couple of times your neighborhood. And then you have spent all your life in New York City. You have built schools. You have do programs in Israel and Morocco and so on and so forth. So, but I just want to do the journey of how did you end up with the civil rights movement and how you got involved and so on and so forth. But not too much how, but the why. What was behind that story, if it makes sense.
So, no, it's a very good question. First of all, thank you. I'm always honored to be with you, David, and to participate in the work that you do. And it's always a great honor for me. So I want to say that at the outset. Um, and I hold you in very high regard, as you know. So that's important. So it's an interesting question. So and no question like that that's so complicated. Is it my parents? Is it the food I ate? Is it the neighborhood? But from one perspective that I would add is the following. I'm born in 1946, after the war was over. I grew up in an America that was heavily um controlled by Eugene McCarthy. Is it Eugene McCarthy? No, whatever his name was. You know, we this whole period of so-called McCarthyism,
Mm-hmm.
meaning that open thought and free thought
Well,
was
banned.
controlled
Yeah.
really seriously. People were terrified of communism,
Mm-hmm.
didn't know what it was, but they were terrified of it. And they were certainly, maybe legitimately, terrified of an atomic bomb because we had dropped two in
To
Hiroshima and
Hiroshima and
Nagasaki.
Nagasaki.
We saw what happened, and we understood that we were now in a arms race with the Soviet Union, and it was dangerous. So, as a kid, I mean, it's ridiculous when you hear it now, but we would hide under our desks as an air raid drill. I mean, it's really ridiculous. But the point was that as children, we were aware that there was something out there that we didn't have any control over, and that the adults thought could endanger our lives. And somehow or another, if we got under the desk, we would be okay. By the way, just as an aside, we that was an era in which everybody chewed gum, particularly bubble gum. And when you were about to
So
get caught, you would take the gum
to
out of your
take
mouth,
and put
put it
under
under
the
your
desk, I
desk.
know.
So when
I
you got
I
under
did
the
this many
desk, it
times.
was a
Yeah.
little bit of a disturbing place to be.
I
Okay.
know.
But in 1960, when I was 14,
Mm-hmm.
the Xerox Corporation produced a film called Let My People Go, which contained the first footage released to the public about the Holocaust. There was very little. Today, Holocaust knowledge or denial, either one, is pervasive not only in the United States, but around the world. But in the 1950s, you knew, and I think really only the Jewish community talked about 6 million Jews having been killed. But otherwise, this was a quiet, unknown piece of business. And then this film came out, and at the same time, several of the documentary books came out,
Mm-hmm.
and we were faced with two different pieces of information. As an American, as a member of the world community, you were faced with a humanistic question.
Yeah.
In other words, what's the nature of the society in which we live that we're capable of doing something like this? And as a Jew, the question of what does it mean to be such a victim? Like why do all these people, why would these people have done what they did? But the
Yeah.
third question, and the one that answers your question is, we were told both overtly and certainly much more covertly, if the good Germans had stood up and resisted the imposition of all of this horrible violence, none of this would have happened.
Oh, Peter, you have a book who came out in France about it. The guy did a study and say to get this level of deportation, you need to have at least 50% of the population of France helping
Okay,
to give you
but I want to put
yeah,
that into
yeah,
perspective
yeah,
of the following.
yeah,
The perspective is that now, after Gaza, and after this, while we're in this war with Iran, and after ICE and taking people off the street, I'm not quite so prepared to be so judgmental of those good Germans who didn't do anything, because it's clear that that's where we all are.
yeah,
We are much more self-protective than we are societally protective.
yeah.
Now, now I want to add one other piece of this, which is, however, at the time, as a 14, 15, 16, 17-year-old, the message that was conveyed about the fact that had the Germans, everyday people, stood up, terrible things wouldn't have happened, coincided with national attention to Martin Luther King and the civil rights movement and the violence against uh, civil rights activists in the South in the early 1960s. And so when you put those pieces together as a young person, and I speak here for myself and all my friends, there was no question about the fact that this you had to be part of this movement because it was you. That's what you, in other words, here we were, kids being told if the good Germans had just stood up and done anything, the horrible
I
things
know,
wouldn't have happened.
but you put these two dots together where not everybody in America converge on that
I
story.
don't,
So
I think that it's not fair. I
okay,
think that
okay,
almost all of America put those two pieces together.
okay,
Some people put their lives on the line,
yeah,
like what we did.
yeah,
And remember, we were also young, so we didn't take
yeah,
we
yeah, yeah,
didn't
yeah.
take that part seriously.
Sure, yeah, yeah.
Other people, everybody was shocked. Everybody when the pictures of the beating of the marchers from Selma to Montgomery were on television,
Yeah,
everybody in the country was shocked,
yeah.
and it led to a change in attitude and legislation. And you had Lyndon Johnson, who was a Southern, really Southerner, leading the charge. And I think that the overwhelming majority of people were affected. Now, it is correct that they were affected as long as it was taking place someplace else. In other words, so when it came to Queens, then and they wanted to build a housing project where blacks would move in on 108th Street and the Horace Harding Boulevard and the Long Island Expressway. So
That's
then there was a problem in
it was a
Forest Hills
problem.
with all these very nice liberal
Exactly. And that's
friends of
what
mine.
my
Okay.
friend worked at the Queen's Community House, who was founded because of that story, in some
So,
part.
by the way, you should know that my father, who was a rabbi in that area of Queens, so he was the co-chair of actually there was a Catholic Jewish Relations Board after Vatican II, but he was also the co-chair of the Black Jewish clergy of Brooklyn and Queens, and he marched and protested the opposition to the building of that housing project, almost lost his job as a result.
Yeah,
So he was a good model.
yeah,
Um, or vice versa. He might say I was the model, and he was he was doing what his son was doing. But in any case, um, I think that impact of the Holocaust was fundamental in setting in my mind the path of my life, what I had to do, and it was reinforced by all of the educational environments in which I was a participant. In other words, I was at Queens College, and it was a classmate of mine, Andy Goodman, who was one of the three boys who was murdered in Mississippi. I was in a Jewish youth movement who understood that they had to stand for something, and they had to be on the correct side of these issues, even if it wasn't like the grand purpose. It was a purpose.
Hmm.
And all of my friends, um, now maybe you could say self-selective, but all of my friends were activists.
But yeah, which part of your friend came first? They were friends because of the access you had to them,
You
or
know, I think when I think back to it, I think we were all evolving in the
interesting?
same direction at the same time. That and I do believe that both Dr. King and Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel represented for us models within the religious community that gave us a path, a route, a justification, a theology, certainly a philosophy. And we also have to remember in the 1960s, and it really lasted all the way through the Vietnam War, I would say, the religious community was politically activist left of center, not as today, was not conservative. And therefore, your models of social justice
Well, stronger.
were the
Yeah,
Jesuit priests, the brothers
yeah,
Berrigan,
yeah,
were Heschel, were King,
yeah,
were Andy Young, were
yeah,
Jesse Jackson. In other
yeah,
words, it's a different time.
yeah.
If today, if today a religious leader tried to take real leadership, people would be shocked, number one, and very suspicious. It would be exactly the opposite. When in the era of the civil rights movement, the church was the place where you had political meetings.
Yeah,
If today somebody suggested going into a church to have a political meeting,
yeah.
only if that was the only place that, you could get a free space, but otherwise that's not, you know, uh, with the exception maybe of Congregation B'nai Jeshurun, where literally just yesterday they had a very radical engagement of
Yeah, it was
religious Jewish
yeah,
Zionists.
it was a synagogue in Jackson where I organized many meetings at the synagogue because they were so open to have this type of discussion. But yes,
But it's
yeah,
rare.
it's
It's
rare.
rare.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So okay, so but you do the civil rights movement and so on and so forth, but you didn't. Okay, you didn't say I'm done. Now I can get married. I can have kids, and you have kids, and you got married, and I can do this or do that. No, you kept you kept you kept because that's
Correct.
really what I'm interested into. It's and I have many friends and I see many situations where people start somewhere, but quickly or not quickly they end up somewhere else, and I'm still trying to figure this one out. So, what make you keep going in some ways and build all the structure you have built?
So
So,
I'll tell you a story. Rabbi Heschel was once asked, an interviewer said to him, Rabbi Heschel, um, you talk about the war in Vietnam, and so few people are actually really opposed to it, and the issues of civil rights. And as you're talking, this was in 1964, 65, you sound so pessimistic. Are you as pessimistic as you sound? And Heschel said, no, I am an optimist against my better judgment. So, so part of it is is dispositional. I remain an optimist against my better judgment. I probably would even be more positive than Heschel. I'm an optimist because I think that that my views are gonna prevail. In other words, I think that we can't operate in the social sphere without positive thinking, without hopefulness, and without optimism.
Okay, but where this come from? I mean, I understand the being of, but what I'm trying to connect with, it's you know, this something has been very interesting, and it. I mean, when you build the Heschel School, I spoke with a couple of people at the beginning. It was not simple.
No,
It was a tough things to put together. A school with 5 people who are now we are thousand, and it's a big institution. But the beginning of it was painful, was complicated, was not. I don't know.
so look, I mean, I don't know obviously
Yeah,
that there's an answer to the
uh-huh,
question,
uh-huh.
but I think um, my own internal spirit has always been one has weighed in on the positive side of the scale. So that's part of it. I'm not a I am not a pessimist. Um, and I do always look at things from a very positive view. I'm not naive. I don't walk around with rose-colored glasses. They're clear as day. Um, but I don't see any alternative. In other words, I guess what the other thing I would say is this: I don't think of myself. I'm sure I am in many ways, but I don't think of myself as being selfish. I remember being selfish as a little kid. I was an only child, so everything belonged to me. So I had to learn, and I learned in camp how to share. I had no siblings. And I might say that maybe camp is a very important ingredient in all of this. As a child, to be in an environment for 2 months out of 10 months, out of 12 months, it's a lot, in which you're in a sharing, value-centered environment. But ultimately, I think that it's all the ingredients of being an American and being an American Jew that were put together that made it work that way. For example, I'm 14 years old and John Kennedy becomes the president of the United States. Now, I understand today people look back historically and have all kinds of criticism of Kennedy about this and that, but I can't reproduce
I
for
know.
you how powerful that
Oh
was.
yeah, yeah,
I remember walking to get to Forest Hills High School. You could walk down a bunch of side streets, or you could walk down the street that for 3 or 4 blocks away, you would see this sort of center tower of the school, on top of which was an American flag. And I walked that route every day on purpose to have that flag flying in my face because John Kennedy was the president of the United States. I mean, it
yeah,
was really,
yeah,
that was an extraordinary piece.
yeah.
And look, when he was assassinated, um, we were really devastated. I mean, I went to Washington that weekend and stood with my friend Mickey Schur,
Yeah.
who's in the King picture with me.
Uh-huh.
We stood outside the Capitol with millions of people waiting for our turn to pass by the coffin under the rotunda of the Capitol. I'll never forget it. So it was losing a member of the family, but when that member of the family was present, he represented you know,
Yeah,
the torch has been passed to a new generation of
yeah,
Americans. I mean,
yeah,
really, that was like
yeah,
he was talking to me.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Um, and then, he was in the end succeeded by Bobby. Bobby was really more in the streets. He was transformed, maybe even by his brother's death, into a man who understood that his future was with the people.
yeah,
And the talk that he gave in Indianapolis on the night that Dr. King was assassinated, when he told this black audience what had happened. And then I have the privilege of accompanying him through the streets of Atlanta behind Dr. King's coffin uh, on April 9th, 1968. And 2 months later, he's dead. So you could say, well, that would logically make everybody pretty depressed. But my conclusion from all those things was there was just more work to do.
Yeah. No, I understand the conclusion. Look, you have been working with Morocco. You have been working for try to put the pieces of the Middle East together for all your life, more or less. And the situation now, it's a disaster.
Terrible.
So it's terrible. So, but you keep going, you keep doing the Kivunim, you keep doing your program, you keep talking to people, you keep talking to the kids, and helping the new generation. So how do you see this going? It's go beyond you. It's like something, I don't know. It's
Well, I told you the other day, I'm on my way to Morocco over this weekend. I'm
exactly.
taking a group of parents of Kivunim students. First time we're taking a parents program. And by coincidence, there is a conference taking place in the city of Essaouira, beautiful city on the Atlantic Ocean, run by our partners in Morocco, the Association Mimouna, which is this organization of young Moroccans who are not so young anymore. They're in their mid-30s,
Mhm.
who are dedicated to the idea that that in order to be a real Moroccan, you have to know your Moroccan Jewish history, and you have to know about Moroccan Judaism, because the king says that the Jews were in Morocco before the Arabs came and
Yeah,
before Islam existed,
of course.
and therefore the Jews are the real Moroccans.
Yeah,
So therefore, if you're going to be a real Moroccan, you have to know your Moroccan Jewish history. It's a concept inconceivable in America.
I
You
know.
know, it's really,
I know.
in
It's
other words,
very
we
complicated.
have indigenous people and we completely ignore them,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Completely. So, um, but I'm going to this conference with these parents just by coincidence. But what is this conference? It's a it's a conference of Holocaust education, Holocaust teachers from Iraq, Lebanon, Syria, Azerbaijan, Egypt, Tunisia, and Morocco. Now, the stereotype is Arab world, Holocaust denial. That's it. And I've been asked to give this talk about the meaning of the Holocaust in Arab society, which I will try and do. In other words, they want it forward projected. But that's an indication of what the possibilities are, as long as you don't fall into the trap of the stereotypes, which so deeply bias the way in which we think about people who are different than we are. That's
Yeah.
the key piece here is, and this is what I start every Kivunim year with, the Bible, the Torah, whether you believe that it's written by God, as some people believe, or whether you believe it's written by human beings, it's thousands of years old. That everybody agrees. So it contains some certainly ancient perspective on life. And it begins, if to the extent that it's a Jewish book, it should start with the Exodus from Egypt, or even the slavery in Egypt, because that's where our national story starts. But it starts in a garden with one man and one woman. And the ancient rabbis say that's because it is to teach us that there is one mother and one father, and that no one can say that my blood is redder than your blood. Now, we don't succeed in conveying that message, but that is the message. And if that's the case, then that's the bedrock upon which to build a different kind of world. And what I've experienced over the last, let's say, 20 years of working with young people on Kivunim is that when almost always only Jewish kids, even though we're open to everybody, it's a Jewish content program, so it's a little limited. Coming from across the United States, when they begin to encounter differences in skin color, in language, in costume, in food, in art, in architecture, in music, instead of being afraid, their whole being opens up. I've got tons of Kivunim alumni who have become Arabic majors and Middle East studies majors who never would have imagined themselves doing something and would not have done it had they not gone on Kivunim. Now, what's the meaning of that? You can say, what's a big deal? You study Arabic. the big deal is that when you learn about the other, they no longer possess the demon that you have been raised, even psychologically,
yeah,
internally, to
yeah,
fear.
yeah,
That the fear is gone,
yeah.
and
And this,
and that's critical.
yeah,
And that doesn't take a lot of effort.
yeah,
That just takes a certain value structure
yeah.
to say this has got to be
No,
part.
the point is what is your experience, not what you believe, but what is your experience. And when you face, when you move people to face that type of experience, it changes them because they experience the life in another way, in another. Then if you watch the news all day long, I mean, that's going to be complicated.
And by the way, it doesn't all have to be alive. Like we have a film series on
Yeah,
Kivunim once a week, curated film series. And one of those films that we show early in the year is the Battle of Algiers.
yeah,
Because it's very important that while you're facing the horror of terrorism aimed at you, you do have to understand how this horror of terrorism began in the first place.
yeah,
But you have to understand what your own role was in getting here, because you can't end it if you don't know what started it. It's just, there are simple factors like that that are really critical. And the more that it's so ironic, right? We're in a world where it would be so easy for us
I
to
know.
open, and instead we're
It's
moving in the
everything.
opposite
It's
direction.
such an opportunity. That's what I say to people all the time. I say it's such an unbelievable situation. We have all this technology, we have all this connection, we have all this. And then it will be so easy to resolve food, to resolve distribution of wealth, to this, and then we are stuck with this frame of absurdity.
Correct.
Which it's really
Correct. So therefore, to come back to your original question,
yeah,
um, maybe we don't know how you fully develop optimism and hopefulness. Maybe we don't know, but those are the ingredients that have to be the underpinning of all education, both in the family and certainly beyond.
yeah,
And when we, as does happen, when we face those things that scare us, we have to be bolstered to realize that those things are they're there exactly for that purpose, to sort of take us back a step. Okay,
absolutely, yeah,
you know, Lenin said one step forward, two steps back.
yeah,
So you have to recognize that that's gonna it's not a perfect world, and the human being is not perfect, and it's not gonna all be there. But I mean, some of it is very ironic. The state of Israel and the Zionist movement, with all of its the negative claims, which is not our discussion today, the Zionist movements and Israel's national anthem is called Hatikva, the hope. And you produced a country with tremendous pessimism and hope, and bordering on hopelessness. So some people will say, well, no, you see how powerful we are. Power isn't hopefulness, you know.
yeah.
Uh, they and you have to generate, you have to work at the development of hopefulness, because if you have hopefulness, you will have optimism.
Yeah, yeah. Even I mean, like one of founders, Siloism, say, you have to learn to laugh. You have to learn, and I never understood really the story of learning to laugh. But when my mother got with complicated situation and so on and so forth, the only way of relating with her was, and she's still alive, by the way, but it was to find a way to laugh of the situation, to find a way to open that situation, to create another, because during COVID it was very complicated for her, and she got very depressed. And really, and I understood the notion of learning to laugh. How do you work at it? How do you, because laughing for the joke it's fine, but when your situation is not that
Correct.
funny, it gets complicated. How do you keep the sense of humor? How do you keep the positive vision of it? That's really where the challenge is. Peter, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Anything you want to close? But it was fantastic.
No, that's the whole point, is there's no close.
There is no
But I'll be
close.
happy to give you a report either from Essaouira or after I come back from
Yeah,
it?
we have many other stuff to talk about, but I don't want to mix it too much.
Okay.
I think we are very good on the target, and really I appreciate what you do,
Okay.
and I appreciate you to be on this
Thank
today.
you, David.
Thank you so
Thank you.
much.
Take good
Appreciate it.
care.
Thank you.
Bye.